How's it going? I think I'm live anyway. Uh, kind of, I done a video the last day about the divisions, how to use the system that we have at the minute in order to kind of regalify the country, I suppose, to coin a term. But I kind of started at the bottom and didn't really mention the top, so I thought I'd just kind of talk about like the way at the moment we have a bicameral system. We have the Dáil and the Seanad. So under under the Gaelic system, it's kind of outside a lot of modern political terminology. So there's like you'd have the bicameral, like the Dáil, or a lot of countries. Well, about half the countries I think in the world are bicameral, and nearly everybody else, like modern countries, are unicameral. So they'd only have like say the Dáil, and they'd make all the decisions, and then maybe a head of state or whatever. And there'd be throughout history there was a few tricamerals. So you had like say in Bolivar, he had a tricameral system of off the top of my head, it was the Senate, and there was the Tribune, and then there was the censors. So basically, the Senate was kind of supposedly meant to be a kind of a hereditary post like that, was handed down, and then basically you had the elected tribune, who would have been like the Dáil, and then the third part of that system would have been the censors, and their job was specifically to basically be professional Gemo Doherty's, I suppose, and go after the government if they were acting up outside the constitution laid out. But it'd be a state body that would be doing that, which kind of hard to keep these things separate. Like, but under the Gaelic system, the way it well supposedly worked was that most of the time there never really was any need for hiking. It was generally whenever the whole country was either nothing going on whatsoever. There was a hiking that kind of had, basically the same power as, the modern president of the country. Didn't really do anything. Just kind of knew he was the top dog in the country. So then in times of war, like in Brian Boru, like in one of his, like the reason he's called Boru is that's tribute in Irish, and he done that because Leinster was acting up, and Boru went in with an army and kicked the head of the Leinstermen and took a tribute off them, which was that they had to send basically slaves, or the Gaelic slave wasn't really what plantation America was like, but it was fairly it was like that. The slaves generally weren't for life, like it was kind of like indentured servants, I suppose you'd call them. But anyways, the hiking, like that would have been a kind of people think it was kind of a unicameral system where you had like basically one dictator over the country, whereas it wasn't really in most situations, at least from my understanding. Like it wasn't really like that most of the time. Really, the three main offices that you had, the king was one of them. Then on the other side you had the poets, like the Ardal, like the Olu, the national, the doctor of letters, or whatever you want to call him. And then the third would be the bishop, or, St. Patrick. Whenever he came, that was it's interesting to read the Seanachas more, like just even the introduction to it, and it explains how before St. Patrick there was no actual written kind of code of conduct. It was all handed down by what do you want to call it, the Druids, or the Breton Law, or the poets basically. What St. Patrick got them to do was to codify this into a written law called Céin Padraig, and the reason for that was, well, I won't go into this too deep. Like it's very interesting. If you just read the Seanachas more, if you get a chance, even the first part of it, talking about the prophecies of the Druids that the written word was going to come and supplant the spoken word, and the old law of Moses, which was an eye for an eye, with the redemption, basically being able to, work penance into your life in order to not, to absolve yourself of guilt. It's very, very interesting. But basically, you had a lot of ancient historians that weren't kind of biased towards, especially after the British invasion, like that weren't biased against the Irish. Like you could even say Caesar, and whenever he was writing, was biased against the Irish because there's a lot of proof that they just couldn't take over. They couldn't get landed to get a foothold to take over. But anyways, the like a lot of early Christian Irish bishops like ended up as saints, like in Orthodox Church, whatever, every church going to this day, like because their system suited the St. Patrick system, like that he brought into the country, like. So basically, the Bicameral. So you have, like, in a modern day sense, this would be probably the biggest change, one of the biggest changes anyway, to removing this kind of British template that we took up in 1916 in order to kind of get our country functioning again. Like, because obviously in the War of Independence, there would have been the War of Independence was carried out because they were basically burning down police stations, courthouses. The Irish were like in order to set up their own courts, but of course they had to replace them with something, and the Brehons have been gone virtually since the 1700s, so they didn't really have any professionals. They just kind of had to go with what they had and keep going, and most people would have been kind of, especially from the educated parts of Ireland, like would have been kind of used to the Anglo legal system. So that's what was carried through into our own country today. But trying to bring that back to a Gaelic setting, we still unknowingly take part in a kind of a Breton Law or a part of the Breton Law. Whenever someone's having an argument and someone that, say, if I'm shouting at someone and someone's shouting back at me and someone steps in and breaks up the argument and goes, "What's going on?" And I say my bit, then the other person interrupts and says their bit, and then the fella goes, "Right, I've heard enough. This is what's happening. This is how you're fixing it." That's the basic fundamental principle of Breton Law. You don't need lawyers, books, whatever, like for small things anyway. Like on a day-to-day basis, we all do this anyway. Like this is what I find the beautiful thing about it. It's kind of like, I remember I heard a guy referring to it as a decentralized court system, which it's kind of, it gives it a bit more grandeur than it maybe deserves, but it's such a simplistic way of doing things. And whenever, like for an example, whenever Cain Patrick came in, the only thing that Patrick changed about the way that the judgments were given was that traditionally an Irish person used to tap their head or else tap their foot because they'd be rhyming out the judgment. It was meant to be given as a kind of a poem, and that's like the old Shanachal, like whatever, like all these old sayings. They were old. Like the early bird gets the worm. Or finders keepers, losers weepers. That's the fundamentals of the Shanachal. Like, was that, well, that's what's happened. So, tough titties, like. But basically, it worked all its way up that if things got complicated, you had obviously the special class of the learned, the filu, or whatever you want to call them, which were basically philosophers, like. But a lot of these guys would have started off young and interested in the Breton Law and the traditions of doing things. And they would have studied, traditionally it's said that they studied for 20 years in order to learn all these traditions. And it's easy to understand how long it would take to learn kind of the way of doing things. Like if you start at the age of, say, 12 or 15, learning kind of like a psychological, analytical kind of view of the world, you probably would be in your mid-30s or 40 by the time you kind of knew really what to do in a situation, like if you were studying intensely. But in nearly to be able to translate it into day-to-day life kind of thing. It's grand writing it in a book and kind of picking your own examples or whatever, but the real world just is just not that clean cut at times. But yeah, the way, like, you can read a lot of stuff about the way these rules was written, but I don't know, I kind of have a gripe with the likes of, like, the way Trinity College and all would talk about it, like, because a lot of it is kind of like, oh, it's lost and gone forever, and it's like, yeah, but at the same time they're not quoting, some guy in a village in down in or Limerick somewhere to to include that as a tradition, which is the Gaelic way. Like, like the first law in Ireland was attributed anyway to the time of the Partholonians, whenever they landed, and basically Parthenon's wife, she went away doing the dirty on him with one of the servants that used to serve wine to his wife. So he caught the smell of wine off the servant's breath anyway, and he killed the servant. And if I can just find it here now at the minute, I have books all around me, and it's not great for the the flow of the thing. But here it is here. The first law in Ireland, that is the first adultery to be heard of, made here in the beginning. The wife of Partholon, a man of rank, to go to an ignoble henchman. He came after the henchman and slew him with anger. To him there came not the help of God upon the weir of the kin murder. Like, that's part of the first. That's the way the laws were written back then. That's just translated directly. It's basically the first law outlawed murdering people of your own tribe in the country, and along with the Partholonians, that also came the tradition that if someone came to your house at night, or just before dark, that you had to give them a place to stay and something to eat, but they had to work for you the next day until you decided, right, that's you paid for, and then you could let them go on then. And they also brought, traditionally it said, brewing and some of the rules, the older kind of basic rules about brewing alcohol and keeping cattle, which was obviously massively important. Like, so from that, in our tradition, it built on until it became this massive tomes and tomes of books. Like, from it included stories from when we were living in Egypt as the Scythians and stuff like that. All these different. This is what our Anglo man, son of Glanvin, did. So that's the tradition. So we should do that as well because it's a good idea, because it worked out this way, and it was time tested. It wasn't like, oh, we'll try this legislation here now, and sure, if it works, we'll keep it, and if it doesn't work, we'll amend or repeal it. It didn't work like that. So, yeah, basically, go back to the tricameral system that I was on about. You have, say now, in modern Ireland, like, maybe you could say the bishop, I suppose. But, you could just call them the file as well, which kind of means like the philosopher, maybe. I think that will probably be the poet. Be kind of a word for poet. But then you see the Olu, and the Olu, he was a kind of a poet too, but it's kind of like in an English, well, and I suppose in American English kind of way, he'd probably be more like the doctor of letters. So he'd be like a master of arts kind of thing, like. So yeah, and then on the other side you have like the kings or the Aras, the rulers. So they kind of, the Ara would kind of look after your day-to-day stuff. He'd be in charge of making sure the law was adhered to. He'd have to make sure that the people were fed and not being attacked by a foreign army or something like that, or raided. That was his kind of two general jobs. Like, it's just generally keep people happy day to day with the kind of material side of things. And that kind of comes from the Seanchus Mór as well, that there was, whenever they wrote it, there was a poem nearly at the start of it, but it's translated, it's Leary, Cork, and Derry, the Hardy. That's the three kings that was there whenever they wrote the Seneca More. That said there a bit like this is what should be in the Seneca More, and the Hardy. It's kind of like a bad translation. It's like, like the physical. Like it comes from the old Irish dur, kind of comes from Latin durable. That kind of way. And then there's Patrick, Benin, and Carnock, the just. So they were kind of like the I don't know what you'd call them. They were like, I suppose, the bishops at the time. Like, so so they were morally kind of upstanding. And then Rossa, Dovtuck, and Fergus with science. They were the like basically the druids that knew all the Breton laws. Like, and that was, as I said, time tested. Like, that's the science. It was replicated behavior. That you knew it was kind of going to work. Like, but these were the main pillars of the Seneca More, it says at the end of it, But so basically, under a Gaelic system, I would say we try and mimic that as much as possible. Like, so like my idea would be like you'd have the Ara and the Olive, or the king and the Olive, whatever, and then the bishop or the file, like the philosopher. Like, like it just kind of depends on whether you want how close you want to stick with it. Like a lot of these things, the names weren't particularly important. Like it's nearly like that like what's in the name kind of thing. It's just everybody kind of generally accepted, yeah, that's the guy that's in charge of that other guy. It didn't need to be written in paper or to have big signs written about it or anything like that. It worked for thousands of years before we had writing, or it predates institutions, this. So like you can have the Ara, who would be like the regular county council guy. Then you would have the Olu, who would kind of be in charge of the school district, or he'd be in charge of I suppose the school district is good, like the Department of Education locally, maybe the Department of Health or something like that. And then you'd have the philosophers, like, and they would be like the at the highest level, I suppose. That would be like what the Shanad was supposed to be whenever this country was founded. Like, it was the well-educated, the guys that didn't really need anything, so they could sit around all day reading books, like, that kind of thing. But generally, from them three ranks, historically, like you have 6 ranks below them, so there was 7 highest ranks, and that comes back into tradition as well. That the Gaels used to wear colour. The colour of their clothes told their rank, like that a king wore the 7 colours of the rainbow. Starting at the bottom, working up then to whatever it is, indigo or violet, whatever, up the real high end of the scale started with like whatever it is, red. So yeah, that's how they done that, and like they would have had a ring, like would have signified that you're a local leader, like a signet ring or whatever. But that then you see from them 7 ranks. Then if you look at, like, say, a tradesman, you have like, say, if you were like back then a blacksmith, or you used to mill wheat or something like that, or make combs. It doesn't matter really. Like, that would have been part of a rank of jobs. Like, like, you would have had a trainee blacksmith. Like, you had farmers or aras. Like they were because it was based on the family system. You had basically the ara would have began as what's called an ogara, and the ogara, like the young protector, basically. He was like the modern day version of, if you say like a young man, basically, like, hello young man, kind of a half respectable kind of young fella, and generally in the Gaelic system, whenever they were that age, that was the kind of guy that used to like go live in the garage when he was like 14 or 15 or 16 or whatever. He had a little bit of space, a little bit of extra responsibility given to him that he's not going to act up, like. So, and then the next stage up from that was because we were an agrarian system, or an agrarian country at the time, was the Boara, which was basically like, right, he's old enough now that he can go away and look after cattle for the day. And it's where it's connected to where the Irish word for boy comes from, like boohil, like boy, cow herder, like cowboy. And basically, whenever your wealth, basically your earnings,
uh, built up from the time that you became a boara, which was whenever you were given a cow as payment to look after all your father's cattle. You used to breed those cattle along with your father's until you had enough cattle to get set up on your own that you could basically be self-sufficient with meat and milk, that you could trade, make leather, that kind of thing, or sell for leather, that you could set up your own household. Uh, it kind of depended, on what you wanted, what line of work you wanted to go into, where you could get land, whatever like that. Because part of this system is like under the legal system. Like say if something was stolen, and someone, the person that was stolen off found out where it is, confronted the person, and it was agreed, right, you can have it back. That person then had a chance to go get that stolen property and bring it back to like this kind of this place that was set out in stone. Like it would have been like, like a fair green in the middle of a town or something like that. Well, he would have had to bring it into there. That's the pound, and he would have had to leave it there overnight, and then the guy who had it stolen off him could go in and inspect it and make sure everything was all right. And if it wasn't right, he could say to the fella, "There's something wrong here. There's something wrong. Like that. You stole my cow off me, and it has a broken leg, so you owe me, like a couple of bags of wheat." It was all fairly well laid. Well, fairly. It was fantastically weighed out. Like so. Basically, you'd have these little demesne lands, and that would include, like, say, for hospitality, like the brewery. Like the brewer in the local area would have also usually had like a building where travellers could stop, buy beer, trade, whatever. And he would be given about, it usually says about 100 acres of land. Like, but yourself, we make do with kind of living on top of each other these days, so that'd probably be a lot less if we reverted back to that system. But so if he decided, if this guy was like really well liked in the area and he wanted to be a brewery, he could apply, like, to ask the king, can I set up a hotel, basically, and get the privileges and the rights and the responsibilities that are attached to that. And basically, yeah, he'd work his way up through the ranks there from then if he felt like it, or else he'd just stick to being a brewery, a wee small time brewery, or could try to be one of the best in the world, or the best in the country at least. Like, so it was the same with all basically all these workers, and that includes, like, a lot of people would be interested in it these days is homesteading, where you have kind of they're nearly like a self-isolated from power rank, There's not a lot expected of them, like, say, paying tax or anything like that, but they just don't really have any say in what goes on outside their patch of ground, like, which a lot of people, I think, would kind of appreciate these days. But then, like, even if you look into St. Gobnotch, I'm probably butchering that name, but she's the patron saint of the, what you call that place, Ballyverney, down in Cork. And like, she wrote the bee laws, so the bee judgments, back in, like, I think 600 AD, something like that. And they are, like, it's unreal. Like, it's well worth reading. It's all about, if I go stumbling around a forest in your land and I find a beehive that you didn't know about, how much of that am I entitled to? You're allowed a quarter of it, basically. But there's so much detail that goes into it. It's just like, well, it's nearly filling out every eventuality, like, like what would happen in that situation that would naturally kind of keep people happy. And it's amazing to read, like, and then you read, like, some essay from someone that spent 4 or 5 years in college studying this, and it's just like, oh, you've just took all the magic out of it. No good at all. But anyways, they're being paid to do this, and I'm not. So, the in the ARA system anyway, or what I was on about the last day, there would be, like, with the local divisions. I thought I'd kind of explain that a bit more. That generally, whenever someone kind of assumes the rank of a kind of a leadership role, there's going to be naturally someone that they would see even as like the kind of presumptive heir to the throne kind of thing, which, that was the original Taoiseach and tarnished. you know. So in the same system, like I was on about like trying to remove someone from a system where you would basically have, if someone got elected, it would just be their tarnished that gets put in place a lot of the times. Like this is why it's kind of, you can vote them out if you want, but otherwise it'll just kind of keep self-replicating basically throughout the country. That was just the point that I was going to bring up. But yeah, the tarnished, he used to have a lot more actual function than what we have today, basically as the vice prime minister. Like the tarnished was kind of in charge of a lot of day-to-day running of the area. Like, you know, he would have been like, if you think of it in the terms of like a common system, the Taoiseach was like the chairman, you know, making sure that everything was kind of going well, you know. Whereas if he needed something done, he'd tell the tarnished to do this, do that, do the other. Like the tarnished would have been like the secretary of a common that actually had to organise things, like, and the you know, like the Ara or the king or whatever would oversee that everything's being done correctly, like a chairman, you know, everything is being put in place correctly. And one of them things obviously would have been, I was on about the like criminal justice system. So if it came to a case, or say you had a fugitive on the run, like a guy has, you know, I used the example, a guy stole a load of diggers around Boyle, and he was meant to stay in and around his home, and he didn't. He's broken the law, like he's a complete felon, like, you know. So what would happen then is a similar system to, like, say, like Wild West America, where you had the sheriff who could have been like, you know, either the Ara or some other young fit fella that kind of has a level head on his shoulders that the Ara knows. He'd say, right, gather up a lock of boys and go search for that fella and bring him back to me. So basically the rule was that fugitive, anyone that helped him along the way, like to hide or anything like that, they became automatically equally as guilty and deserved the exact same punishment for the crime. And that was brought in specifically like to limit people breaking the law, like that people would rat on each other basically to keep the system going. But it worked perfectly because, you know, obviously it took hundreds of years of British trying to kill us, like to try and eradicate this out of most of the country. Like, so yeah, it was like in a modern day sense that would be kind of workable. Like you would have, like, say, a reserve Garda force, you know, like you could even do this on a federal level kind of thing, you know, like in the States. Or, you know, you could just have, you know, a guard in each village, and then him kind of telling everyone, right, this is what we got to do, go keep an eye out for so and so, this is what he looks like, that's the license plate of his car. Basically a giant community watch system. So yeah, like it'd be the same with civil defence. Like if there was a bit of a disaster, like everything's blown down, bridges blown away and all that kind of crack, like as happens in Donegal quite often, or too often maybe. But yeah, like I suppose even the Cuban army kind of do it today, so why not? Yeah, I was on about the actual the Breton laws. Like, you know, I keep going on about the traditions, but I suppose that's the whole point of this. Like, you know, is that like St. Patrick even had traditions laid out about once he fled. Well, the tradition was that St. Patrick, because he came from wherever, Wales or Western Britain, whatever, he was entitled, because he was from outside the area, to choose anyone to be the Breton, because he didn't know anybody, like, that was fair, like, so he was allowed to choose anybody in the province to be the Breton, like, and everyone was afforded that right after. Before that, it was limited to people in your own locality, like, to stop arguments spilling out over the country, like, it had to be dealt with. But whenever someone was from outside the area, they were getting screwed over, but they were like, we'll give them a fair shot, like, you know, and that stuck. That was one of the Patrick things. So yeah, whenever you go up from, say, as I was saying, like a young fella, like an O'Gara, your kind of the price on your head, as we'll call it, was very low. You know, you might have been only worth a quarter of you might have been only worth a sheep. Do you know that kind of way? If you got killed or something, you know, the blood price that killer had to pay was incredibly low. Like unless your father was like the king, like you know, it was all tribal as hell. Like, but on the same flip side, like a kind of a side of that modern Ireland would probably agree with is that the more your rank in society rose, the higher the fine was if you broke the law. Like if a king broke the law, he had to pay I think 21 cools, which is like basically like a pot of gold. For he could do that twice, and on the third time he got put out, he was banned from being a king. You know, which probably would be a decent enough fine system in this country at this stage. Like, but yeah, the idea that like would probably work better with our own currency, like a fixed kind of I suppose a gold back thing, as I said, like a pot of gold or something like. But you know, like even back in Irish times, like you know, it would have been we still would have adopted a lot of the Roman customs, even though they never technically landed. And one of them would have been like the pound, shillings, pence, you know, the denarii kind of thing. Because just for the simple fact that it's so easy to divide up into, you know, 1/220th or 222nd or whatever pennies was in a pound and a shilling and all that kind of crack. So yeah, we weren't decimal. Like it was all based on just kind of, you know, whatever goes. This is what my old fella used to do, so I'll do that too. You know, seemed pretty sound. Like so, we still kind of work like that in a lot of ways. Like so. Yeah, I was just kind of going through what was in my head for since the last one, just kind of mulling it over in my head. I thought I'd do one anyway. So yeah, I might try a different angle on it the next night, or I might just edit the actual video. Maybe it might be a better idea. Might be a bit better quality or something like that. But yeah, sure. Hopefully I'm not too boring to listen to, but sure. Keeps me entertained anyway during the lockdown. So all the best.